Imagine standing on the shore, staring out at two very different seas. One is crowded with boats, each one fighting for the same fish, their wakes colliding in a churning froth. The water is stained red, not from danger in the natural sense, but from the relentless battle for the same shrinking resources. This is the world of traditional competition, where companies battle head-to-head over the same customers, undercutting each other until there is little room left for growth or profit. Now look further out, beyond the horizon. There is another stretch of ocean, vast and untouched, its waters calm and blue. Here, there are no rival boats, no crowded fishing grounds. It is a place of new markets, unclaimed demand, and opportunities limited only by imagination. This is the territory of the blue ocean, the strategic space where innovation replaces competition, and value creation opens doors to entirely new possibilities. The blue ocean strategy is built on a simple yet radical idea. The best way to win is to stop trying to win the same fight as everyone else. Instead of battling for a bigger slice of an existing pie, you bake an entirely new one. In business terms, this means shifting from competing in existing markets, the red oceans, to creating entirely new markets, the blue oceans, where the rules are not yet set and demand has not yet been claimed. The authors, W. Chan Kim and Renee Moborn, spent years studying companies across industries, searching for patterns in the way market leaders had broken away from competition. What they found was that the most extraordinary growth came not from beating competitors at their own game, but from creating a new game entirely.
In contrast, blue ocean thinking is about rewriting the rules before they are even established. It's not about improving slightly on what already exists. It's about making what exists irrelevant. A classic example is Cirque du Soleil. At a time when traditional circuses were declining, with dwindling audiences and outdated acts, Cirque didn't try to outdo other circuses. They eliminated costly elements like animal performances, elevated the production to a theatrical experience, and targeted an entirely new audience. Adults willing to pay premium prices for a unique blend of artistry, music, and acrobatics. They didn't steal market share from competitors. They created a new market that competitors weren't even aiming for. This is the essence of the strategy: innovation paired with value. Innovation without value can be a dead end, creating products that are impressive but irrelevant to customers. Value without innovation risks stagnation, offering nothing new to draw in fresh demand. But when you combine the two, delivering something fundamentally new that also delivers real benefit to customers, you open a blue ocean. This is why the strategy is not just about being different for the sake of it, but about being different in a way that matters. It's tempting to believe that these blue oceans are rare, that they happen only once in a generation, but history shows otherwise. From the creation of the Ford Model T, which opened car ownership to the masses, to the launch of iTunes, which reshaped the music industry, blue oceans emerge whenever someone has the vision to challenge assumptions about how an industry should work. The challenge is not in finding them, they are everywhere, but in recognizing them before someone else does, and in having the courage to leave the comfort of familiar waters. This first shift, from red ocean competition to blue ocean creation, is more than a business move, it's a mindset shift. It requires letting go of the belief that success comes from fighting harder and instead embracing the idea that it comes from seeing differently. You stop asking, "How can I beat them?" and start asking, "How can I make them irrelevant?" And in that question lies the key to unlocking markets you didn't even know existed.
When you first hear the idea of creating an entirely new market, it can sound like a luxury reserved for industry giants with limitless budgets. But the truth is, blue oceans have been charted by companies both massive and small, often starting with nothing more than a clear understanding of their customers and a willingness to question industry norms. The process begins not with money, but with perspective, with the ability to see patterns others overlook, and to recognize that how things have always been done is not the same as how things must be done. This shift in thinking is called value innovation, and it is the cornerstone of the Blue Ocean strategy. Value innovation happens when you stop focusing solely on beating the competition and start focusing on making them irrelevant by creating an offering that unlocks new value for both customers and the company itself. The authors explain that value innovation requires breaking the trade-off between differentiation and low cost, the old belief that you can either be special and expensive or cheap and ordinary, but never both. In Blue Ocean terms, you do both at once. You create something that stands apart in the market while simultaneously keeping costs low enough to attract a broad audience. This is not about cutting corners or racing to the bottom. It's about restructuring the way value is delivered so that the competition's model no longer applies. A striking example of value innovation is Southwest Airlines. In an industry dominated by major carriers competing on features like assigned seating, in-flight meals, and multiple cabin classes, Southwest stripped away much of the traditional airline experience. No meals, no seat assignments, no complex loyalty programs. But in exchange, they offered consistent low prices, quick turnaround times, friendly service, and a fun, casual brand identity. For customers who valued affordability and reliability over luxury, Southwest created a Blue Ocean. They didn't win over frequent first-class travelers from big airlines. They pulled in a whole new segment of budget-conscious flyers who otherwise might not have flown at all. To find these opportunities, the authors present a tool called the Strategy Canvas. Imagine a graph where the horizontal axis lists the key factors that the industry competes on: price, features, service level, speed, quality, and so on. And the vertical axis shows the level of offering a company delivers for each factor. Most competitors' lines will look similar, with only small variations. A Blue Ocean opportunity appears when you deliberately choose to raise some factors far above the industry standard while eliminating or reducing others that customers don't actually value as much as everyone assumes. This deliberate rebalancing creates a new value curve, one that sets you apart instead of blending you in.
But spotting a Blue Ocean opportunity also requires listening differently. In red oceans, companies often listen to their existing customers and try to please them more than their competitors do. In blue oceans, the focus shifts to non-customers, the people who aren't buying from your industry at all. There are usually 3 tiers of them: those on the edge, who might buy but haven't yet; those who consciously avoid the industry because it doesn't meet their needs; and those who have never even considered it relevant to them. When you study these non-customers, you uncover unmet needs and unspoken frustrations that can reveal entirely new markets. Consider Nintendo's Wii. Before its release, the video game market was dominated by high-performance consoles targeting hardcore gamers. Graphics, processing power, and realism were the main selling points, and casual gamers were largely left out. Nintendo took a different approach. They reduced the focus on cutting-edge graphics, eliminated the complexity of traditional controllers, and introduced motion-based gameplay that appealed to families, older adults, and people who had never considered themselves gamers. The result? A Blue Ocean that sold over 100 million units and reached audiences no competitor had thought to target. The lesson is clear. Blue oceans aren't discovered by trying to please the same customers everyone else is chasing. They're created by looking beyond the obvious, by studying what keeps people away and asking what would draw them in. And this doesn't just apply to products, it can apply to services, experiences, and even business models. The key is to combine an honest evaluation of what the industry takes for granted with the courage to discard what doesn't truly matter, freeing resources to enhance what does. And this is where the real challenge begins. It's one thing to understand the concept of blue oceans, it's another to leave behind the safety of the familiar red ocean and commit to uncharted waters. The transition is not without risk, but history has shown that the biggest risk often lies in staying put, in playing the same game as everyone else while the tides of competition slowly drain profitability away. The companies that thrive over the long term are the ones that step into that open expanse of blue, ready to set their own rules.
But spotting a blue ocean opportunity also requires listening differently. In red oceans, companies often listen to their existing customers and try to please them more than their competitors do. In blue oceans, the focus shifts to non-customers, the people who aren't buying from your industry at all. There are usually 3 tiers of them: those on the edge, who might buy but haven't yet; those who consciously avoid the industry because it doesn't meet their needs; and those who have never even considered it relevant to them. When you study these non-customers, you uncover unmet needs and unspoken frustrations that can reveal entirely new markets. Consider Nintendo's Wii. Before its release, the video game market was dominated by high-performance consoles targeting hardcore gamers. Graphics, processing power, and realism were the main selling points, and casual gamers were largely left out. Nintendo took a different approach. They reduced the focus on cutting-edge graphics, eliminated the complexity of traditional controllers, and introduced motion-based gameplay that appealed to families, older adults, and people who had never considered themselves gamers. The result? A blue ocean that sold over 100 million units and reached audiences no competitor had thought to target. The lesson is clear. Blue oceans aren't discovered by trying to please the same customers everyone else is chasing. They're created by looking beyond the obvious, by studying what keeps people away and asking what would draw them in. And this doesn't just apply to products, it can apply to services, experiences, and even business models. The key is to combine an honest evaluation of what the industry takes for granted with the courage to discard what doesn't truly matter, freeing resources to enhance what does. And this is where the real challenge begins. It's one thing to understand the concept of blue oceans, it's another to leave behind the safety of the familiar red ocean and commit to uncharted waters. The transition is not without risk, but history has shown that the biggest risk often lies in staying put, in playing the same game as everyone else while the tides of competition slowly drain profitability away. The companies that thrive over the long term are the ones that step into that open expanse of blue, ready to set their own rules.
But spotting a blue ocean opportunity also requires listening differently. In red oceans, companies often listen to their existing customers and try to please them more than their competitors do. In blue oceans, the focus shifts to non-customers, the people who aren't buying from your industry at all. There are usually 3 tiers of them: those on the edge, who might buy but haven't yet; those who consciously avoid the industry because it doesn't meet their needs; and those who have never even considered it relevant to them. When you study these non-customers, you uncover unmet needs and unspoken frustrations that can reveal entirely new markets. Consider Nintendo's Wii. Before its release, the video game market was dominated by high-performance consoles targeting hardcore gamers. Graphics, processing power, and realism were the main selling points, and casual gamers were largely left out. Nintendo took a different approach. They reduced the focus on cutting-edge graphics, eliminated the complexity of traditional controllers, and introduced motion-based gameplay that appealed to families, older adults, and people who had never considered themselves gamers. The result? A blue ocean that sold over 100 million units and reached audiences no competitor had thought to target. The lesson is clear. Blue oceans aren't discovered by trying to please the same customers everyone else is chasing. They're created by looking beyond the obvious, by studying what keeps people away and asking what would draw them in.
And this doesn't just apply to products. It can apply to services, experiences, and even business models. The key is to combine an honest evaluation of what the industry takes for granted with the courage to discard what doesn't truly matter, freeing resources to enhance what does. And this is where the real challenge begins. It's one thing to understand the concept of blue oceans. It's another to leave behind the safety of the familiar red ocean and commit to uncharted waters. The transition is not without risk, but history has shown that the biggest risk often lies in staying put, in playing the same game as everyone else, while the tides of competition slowly drain profitability away. The companies that thrive over the long term are the ones that step into that open expanse of blue, ready to set their own rules.
But strategic moves are not just about the product or service itself. They also involve positioning and timing. Entering a blue ocean too early, before the market is ready, can be as dangerous as entering too late. The key is to look for inflection points, moments when technology, consumer behavior, or regulation shifts enough to open a window of opportunity. The iPhone, for instance, was not the first smartphone, but it arrived at the moment when mobile internet was finally fast enough. Touchscreens had matured, and users were ready for an all-in-one device that integrated phone, music, and apps. Apple didn't create smartphones, it redefined them, and in doing so, created a blue ocean that left competitors scrambling to follow. The authors stress that this process is not about predicting the future with perfect accuracy, but about actively shaping it. You don't wait for a blue ocean to appear, you create the conditions that make it inevitable. This requires vision, but also discipline. Many companies fail not because they lack ideas, but because they scatter their efforts across too many directions. Blue ocean leaders focus on one clear strategic move and execute it relentlessly until the new market space is theirs. Another critical insight is that creating a blue ocean is not a one-time event. Markets evolve, competitors catch on. What was once uncontested space can quickly become a red ocean again if you stop innovating. Cirque du Soleil, for example, thrived for decades by reinventing its shows and expanding into new themes and formats. Had they relied solely on their initial success, imitators would have eroded their uniqueness. Sustaining a blue ocean requires a commitment to continuous renewal, to looking ahead before the waters become crowded again. And perhaps the most underestimated aspect of this strategy is its psychological impact on the organization itself. When a company stops measuring success solely by how it compares to rivals, it opens the door to more creative thinking, bolder experimentation, and a culture that rewards exploration. Employees begin to see possibilities rather than threats, and leaders shift from defensive moves to proactive creation. The competitive fear that often drives short-term thinking is replaced by a sense of ownership over a bigger vision. Ultimately, the goal of these strategic moves is not just to escape competition, but to redefine what competition even means in your industry. You stop asking, how do we outperform them? And start asking, how do we make their entire approach irrelevant? This is the mindset that turns calm blue waters into your home territory. And once you've experienced it, it's hard to imagine going back to the red ocean.
One of the most powerful ideas in blue ocean strategy is that the limits we believe exist in a market are often invisible walls we've built ourselves. The authors call these industry boundaries unspoken rules, habits, and assumptions that keep companies circling the same competitive battlefield instead of venturing into new territory. Breaking these boundaries isn't about reckless risk-taking. It's about systematically questioning the foundations of your industry until you find openings others have overlooked. To make this process practical, the book introduces what it calls the 6 Paths Framework. These paths are essentially lenses you can use to look at your market in fresh ways, helping you identify where new value might be created.
The first path is to look across alternative industries. This means examining products or services outside your immediate category that satisfy the same need in a different way. For example, cinemas compete not just with other cinemas, but with restaurants, streaming services, and live concerts. All are forms of entertainment. By studying how these alternatives meet customer desires, you can uncover insights that inspire your own reinvention. The second path is to look across strategic groups within your industry. Strategic groups are clusters of companies with similar business models, like budget airlines and premium airlines. Most players compete within their group, rarely crossing into another. But sometimes there's an underserved middle ground, or an opportunity to combine elements of both. Toyota's Lexus line did this by blending luxury features with greater reliability and lower maintenance costs, appealing to customers who wanted prestige without the traditional drawbacks of European luxury cars. The third path focuses on redefining the buyer group. Industries often target a specific decision maker, but what if you shifted your focus to another influencer in the buying process? In healthcare, for instance, companies often marketed to doctors rather than patients. But when pharmaceutical companies began educating patients directly, they empowered consumers to request treatments from their physicians, changing the flow of influence entirely. The fourth path is to look across complementary product and service offerings. Many industries focus narrowly on their core product, ignoring the surrounding ecosystem of use. Think about how Starbucks expanded beyond selling coffee by creating a comfortable, music-filled space where customers could linger, meet friends, or work. By enhancing the experience around the coffee itself, they created a community hub that competitors struggled to replicate.
The fifth path is to rethink the functional, emotional orientation of your industry. Some industries compete largely on price and function, while others focus on emotional appeal. Swatch watches, for example, took a purely functional product, an affordable timepiece, and turned it into an emotional fashion accessory through colorful designs and limited editions. This shift not only created a new audience, but also changed the way people thought about watches entirely. Finally, the sixth path is to look across time. This means anticipating trends before they reshape the market and positioning yourself to lead when they do. Apple saw the rise of digital music and portable devices early, creating the iPod before competitors grasped the cultural shift toward carrying an entire music library in your pocket. By the time others reacted, Apple had already established dominance. What's important about these 6 paths is that they give structure to creativity. Too often, businesses rely on vague brainstorming sessions to come up with the next big thing, only to circle back to familiar ideas. The 6 paths framework forces you to systematically step outside your industry's default assumptions and explore fresh combinations, perspectives, and timelines. But breaking industry boundaries requires more than just ideas. It requires courage. In a red ocean, it's easy to cling to what's familiar, even when it's clear that margins are shrinking and growth is slowing. Blue ocean leaders are willing to bet on a different map, even when others call it unrealistic. And that courage often comes from the realization that the greater risk lies in doing nothing. As the book reminds us, industries don't stand still. If you're not moving into new territory, you're likely being pushed out of the old one. A real-world example of boundary breaking can be seen in Cirque du Soleil. Instead of competing with traditional circuses on star animal acts and celebrity clowns, they eliminated the costly animal shows entirely, raised the level of artistry and storytelling, and created a hybrid of circus and theater that appealed to adults willing to pay theater-level prices for a live experience. They didn't fight for the same audience as Ringling Bros. They built an entirely new one. The 6 paths framework shows us that blue oceans are rarely found by accident. They are discovered when you challenge the map itself,
daring to see beyond the borders your industry has quietly drawn. And once you've crossed into this territory, you realize that the so-called limits were never as fixed as they seemed. They were just lines on a map waiting to be redrawn.
Once you've identified possible blue ocean opportunities, the next step is to make them visible, not just in your own mind, but to your entire team. This is where the concept of the strategy canvas comes in. The strategy canvas is a simple yet powerful visual tool that maps the current competitive landscape and shows exactly how your offering will stand apart. Imagine a graph where the horizontal axis lists the key factors your industry competes on, and the vertical axis shows the level of investment or emphasis on each factor. By plotting your competitors' strategies alongside your own, you can see at a glance where the industry is crowded and where the open waters might lie. Most companies, when they first draw their strategy canvas, discover something revealing. Their curve looks almost identical to everyone else's. The differences are small, the battles are over incremental improvements, and the playing field is essentially flat. This visual reality check can be a turning point because it makes clear that competing harder in the same spots will not lead to lasting advantage. To create a blue ocean, your curve must diverge dramatically from the industry norm, emphasizing factors that others neglect and reducing or eliminating those that drain resources without adding customer value. A famous example of a strategy canvas shift comes from Southwest Airlines. In the 1970s, the airline industry was divided between full-service carriers offering meals, lounges, and multiple seating classes, and low-cost carriers providing bare-bones service. Southwest chose a different curve. It eliminated meals and lounges, reduced costs by using only one type of aircraft, and instead raised convenience with frequent, reliable flights between secondary airports. They essentially competed with car travel and buses rather than with other airlines, carving out a space no one else was serving. The result was a completely different value curve and a blue ocean that lasted for decades. But a strategy canvas isn't just about standing apart. It's about making strategic choices visible to everyone who will execute them. When employees can literally see how the company plans to shift resources, they understand the logic behind changes, and resistance often fades. Instead of wondering why certain services are being cut or new ones are being emphasized, they can connect these moves to a coherent plan for creating uncontested market space.
To craft a compelling strategy canvas, the book suggests beginning with real customer data. This means going beyond surveys and digging into behavior, what customers actually do, not just what they say they want. People might claim they value luxury touches in a hotel, but if occupancy rates spike when prices drop and extras are removed, the data tells a different story. The authors argue that you should always test assumptions against evidence, because much of what industries believe about their customers is shaped by tradition, not truth. Another critical element of the strategy canvas is the value curve, which shows how your product or service delivers on each factor. In a blue ocean move, the value curve is not just higher across the board, that would be too expensive and often impossible, but is shaped differently. You raise certain factors to a level competitors can't match without major sacrifices, and you reduce or eliminate others to free up resources for innovation. This combination allows you to offer something distinct at a cost structure that competitors struggle to replicate. For example, Nintendo's Wii was a masterclass in reshaping the value curve in the gaming industry. Instead of competing on high-end graphics and complex gameplay, the traditional battleground for consoles, Nintendo reduced the emphasis on raw processing power, eliminated the arms race for cutting-edge visuals, and raised accessibility with motion-sensing controls that appealed to families, seniors, and casual gamers. They created a whole new audience who had never considered buying a game console before. The Wii didn't win by being better in the traditional sense. It won by being different in a way that mattered to people who weren't yet in the market. The authors emphasize that the strategy canvas is not a one-time exercise. It should be updated as markets evolve, as customer needs shift, and as new technologies emerge.
A blue ocean move that works today will eventually attract imitators. And if you're not already exploring the next curve, you risk sliding back into the red ocean. The discipline of regularly mapping the competitive landscape keeps you aware of early changes and helps you act before the waters become crowded again. Finally, the strategy canvas serves as a powerful communication tool beyond your internal team. It can be used with partners, investors, and even customers to explain your unique value in a simple, visual way. In an age of information overload, a single image showing how you break away from the pack can be far more persuasive than a stack of charts and spreadsheets. And when people can see your vision clearly, they're more likely to join you in making it real.
One of the traps innovators often fall into is leaping from idea to execution without testing whether the concept will truly resonate with customers and sustain itself financially. The authors of Blue Ocean Strategy address this by introducing what they call the sequence of Blue Ocean Strategy, a step-by-step order for developing a market-creating move. This sequence forces you to answer the right questions in the right order, so you don't end up with a brilliant concept that fails in practice. The first step in this sequence is buyer utility. Before thinking about costs or pricing, you have to determine whether your idea actually delivers exceptional utility to customers. This means looking beyond nice-to-have features and asking, will this fundamentally change the way customers experience value? To help assess this, the authors present a buyer utility map, which breaks down the stages of the customer's experience from purchase to delivery, use, maintenance, and eventual disposal, and pairs them with 6 utility levers like convenience, simplicity, risk reduction, fun, and environmental friendliness. The goal is to identify where your offering can unlock a leap in utility at any stage. Consider the example of Dyson vacuum cleaners. For decades, vacuums were judged mainly on suction power and price. Dyson focused instead on eliminating the frustration of losing suction as bags filled up and the hassle of buying and replacing those bags. They raised utility by solving a pain point that customers had come to accept as just the way things are. This shift didn't just improve performance, it redefined the standard for the entire category. If your idea passes the utility test, the next step is strategic pricing. In a blue ocean, pricing isn't simply about maximizing margins, it's about setting a price that attracts the mass of target buyers quickly before imitators can catch up. The right price point lowers the barrier for adoption while still allowing for a healthy profit. The authors stress that if your offering is priced too high, you risk leaving the mass market behind, which can stall momentum. Conversely, pricing too low can undermine your perceived value and make it difficult to sustain your operations. An example of strategic pricing can be seen in Netflix's early days. By offering unlimited DVD rentals by mail for a flat monthly fee, they position themselves far below the cost of buying movies and competitive with yet more convenient than visiting a rental store. This aggressive pricing, combined with a vastly superior customer experience, quickly built their subscriber base and made it harder for competitors to react effectively.
The third step is cost target. Once you know the price that will attract the mass of buyers, you have to determine whether you can produce and deliver the offering at a cost that ensures profitability. This is where creativity in eliminating and reducing features comes into play. The value innovation framework reminds us that you don't have to add more to be better. You can often deliver greater value at lower cost by removing factors that customers don't truly care about. Take IKEA, for example. They stripped away costly services like assembly and home delivery, reduced the need for large showrooms by using a warehouse-style layout, and focused on flat-pack design to minimize transportation costs. These cost savings allowed them to offer stylish furniture at prices accessible to a much wider audience, creating a blue ocean in the home furnishings market. Finally, the sequence ends with adoption hurdles. Even if your idea is compelling, well-priced, and cost-effective, it may face resistance from stakeholders, customers, partners, or employees.
The key is to identify these hurdles early and plan strategies to overcome them. For customers, it may mean education or trials to build trust. For partners, it might involve demonstrating how your success benefits them. For employees, it often requires transparent communication and incentives that align with the new direction. One vivid example comes from Uber's early expansion. They faced resistance from regulators, taxi companies, and even potential customers unsure about getting into a stranger's car. Uber addressed these hurdles by integrating driver ratings, GPS tracking, and cashless payments into the app, which made the service feel safer and more reliable. These moves didn't just ease concerns, they became part of the product's appeal. Following this sequence, utility, pricing, cost, and adoption creates a discipline that protects you from the common pitfalls of innovation. It forces you to prove that your blue ocean is not only desirable, but also feasible and sustainable before you invest heavily. Too many companies skip these steps, relying on intuition or momentum, only to find themselves stranded in a half-built market that no one is ready to join. The lesson here is that the brilliance of a blue ocean idea lies not just in its originality, but in its careful construction. You don't have to guess whether it will work. You can design it to work. And by following the sequence, you ensure that your move is both a creative leap and a calculated step toward a future where you control the waters, instead of fighting for scraps in the crowded shallows.
Even the most brilliant strategy can fail if the people responsible for carrying it out aren't fully on board. The authors call this the human side of strategy, the process of earning trust, building alignment, and inspiring action across the organization. They argue that creating a blue ocean is as much a leadership challenge as it is an analytical one. You can design the perfect value curve on paper, but without people's emotional and intellectual buy-in, it remains just an idea. One of the biggest mistakes companies make is treating strategy like a confidential plan drawn up behind closed doors, then handed down as a finished decree. Employees often hear about the new direction at the same time as the public, with no opportunity to contribute or voice concerns. This creates skepticism and resistance, even if the strategy itself is sound. The authors suggest flipping this approach by practicing what they call fair process. Fair process doesn't mean everyone gets to make the final decision, but it does mean that everyone has a voice in shaping the strategy and understands the reasoning behind it. Fair process has three main components: engagement, explanation, and expectation clarity. Engagement means involving the people who will execute the strategy in the exploration phase, asking for their perspectives, listening to their experiences, and considering their insights before decisions are made. This doesn't just produce better ideas, it also builds ownership, because people are more committed to something they helped create. Explanation means clearly communicating why certain decisions were made, even if not all input could be incorporated. When people understand the logic, they are more likely to accept the outcome. Expectation clarity means making it explicit what is expected of each person going forward, removing ambiguity that can stall execution. A classic real-world example of fair process comes from the turnaround of British Airways in the 1980s. When the airline was struggling with inefficiency and customer dissatisfaction, the new chairman didn't simply issue top-down directives. He met with employees at all levels, from pilots to ground crew, to hear their frustrations and suggestions. Many of the operational improvements, like reducing turnaround times and improving check-in processes, came from frontline staff. By involving them in shaping the change, the airline created a sense of shared purpose, which fueled one of the most successful corporate turnarounds in history. Another element of the human side is tipping point leadership. In many organizations, the biggest obstacles to change are not the unwilling masses, but a small number of key influencers who hold outsized sway. These might be respected veterans, managers who control critical resources, or even informal leaders whose opinions ripple through the culture. Tipping point leadership focuses on identifying and winning over these people first.
When they adopt the new direction, others follow more quickly, not because they were ordered to, but because they trust the early adopters' judgment.
The book also warns against trying to convert everyone at once. Instead, it suggests starting with concentrated actions that deliver quick, visible wins. These atoms of success create momentum and make the vision tangible. When people see proof that the strategy works in real customer feedback, revenue growth, or operational improvements, skepticism begins to dissolve. Consider the example of Apple's retail stores. When the concept was first introduced, many in the industry were doubtful. Why would a tech company enter the costly world of brick-and-mortar retail when online sales were growing? But Apple focused on delivering an exceptional in-store experience with highly trained staff, product demos, and a clean, open layout that encouraged exploration. Early stores became instant success stories, not just in sales, but in brand impact. These visible wins silenced many critics and attracted talent who wanted to be part of something groundbreaking. At its core, the human side of strategy is about trust. People are more likely to trust leaders who involve them early, explain decisions clearly, and demonstrate that they have considered the human impact of change. Trust accelerates execution because it reduces the friction of doubt and the drag of resistance. In a blue ocean move, where you are often asking people to abandon familiar habits and venture into uncharted territory, that trust is the difference between a vision that soars and one that stalls. The authors remind us that a strategy's success is not measured solely by its brilliance on paper, but by the energy and alignment it generates in the people tasked with bringing it to life. A leader's job is not only to chart the course, but to ensure that everyone is ready to row together when the ship sets sail. And when that happens, the blue ocean isn't just a market opportunity. It becomes a shared journey that people are proud to be part of.
Finding your blue ocean is only half the battle. The other half is keeping it, and that's where many companies falter. A blue ocean, by definition, is uncontested for a time, but it doesn't stay that way forever. Competitors will notice your success and start moving in. Customers' expectations will evolve. Technologies will change. If you don't actively renew your strategy, the clear waters you once dominated can turn into the same red ocean you worked so hard to escape. The authors stress that value innovation is not a one-time event, but a discipline. To keep a blue ocean alive, you must monitor two currents: the external forces of the market and the internal forces of your own organization. Externally, you watch for signs that competitors are narrowing the gap, copying features, undercutting on price, or finding alternative ways to solve the problem you once owned. Internally, you guard against complacency, the quiet assumption that what worked yesterday will work tomorrow. One effective way to renew your blue ocean is through continuous reconstruction. Rather than waiting for threats to close in, you proactively look for adjacent spaces where you can apply your capabilities to create new value. Cirque du Soleil, for example, revolutionized the circus industry by blending theater, dance, and acrobatics into a premium entertainment experience. But they didn't stop there. They continued to develop new shows with fresh themes, music, and staging, ensuring that even loyal audiences had reasons to come back. By the time competitors tried to mimic their original formula, Cirque had already moved forward. Another renewal tactic is to leverage shifts in technology or customer behavior before others do. Amazon provides a textbook example. Starting as an online bookstore was their first blue ocean, offering more selection than any physical store could match. But they didn't cling to that niche. They expanded into general e-commerce, then into cloud computing with Amazon Web Services, each time spotting and seizing a new open space before the market fully recognized its potential.
The danger of failing to renew is evident in companies that once seemed untouchable, but slowly faded into irrelevance. Kodak dominated film photography, but didn't adapt quickly enough to the rise of digital. Blockbuster ruled video rental, but ignored the potential of streaming. Both were in strong positions to lead those transitions. They had the resources, the brand recognition, and the customer base, but they were anchored to old business models. They mistook their current blue ocean for permanent security. The authors recommend building renewal mechanisms directly into your strategy process. That means setting regular checkpoints to revisit your strategy canvas, remap the buyer value elements, and ask hard questions. Has our curve drifted closer to competitors? Are we still delivering a leap in value? Is there an emerging pain point we could solve better than anyone else? Renewal is not reactive. It's a rhythm, a habit of looking forward before the present becomes the past. Part of renewal also involves recognizing when to leave. Not all blue oceans can or should be defended indefinitely. Sometimes, the wiser move is to pivot entirely to a new space, using the profits and brand capital from your current position to fund the next leap. Nintendo's transition from being a playing card company to a video game leader, and later to motion control gaming with the Wii, shows the power of deliberate reinvention. Each time, they stepped away from head-to-head competition and created new categories where they could thrive. A common fear leaders have is that moving too soon means abandoning a still profitable market. But the authors argue that the real risk lies in moving too late. By the time you see clear signs of decline, it's usually because competitors have already eroded your uniqueness. The blue ocean mindset is about anticipating that moment and leaping before you're pushed. Renewal is both a strategic and a cultural commitment. Strategically, it keeps you scanning the horizon for the next opportunity. Culturally, it keeps your organization in a state of creative alertness, where innovation is not a special event, but part of everyday thinking. The companies that master this balance never grow stale because they never stop asking, where is the next blue ocean? When you think of your own venture, the takeaway is simple. The strategy that gives you space today won't necessarily protect you tomorrow. You have to keep creating space in customers' minds, in market positioning, and in the experiences only you can deliver. In the same way that the ocean is always moving, your strategy should always be in motion. And if you keep moving forward, you'll stay ahead of the tides that turn other leaders into laggards.
One of the most dangerous aspects of strategy is that you can drift back into red ocean competition without even noticing it. The shift is often gradual, a small pricing change here, a few added features there, until suddenly you're competing on the same terms as everyone else. The authors describe these as red ocean traps, and they warn that even companies that have successfully created blue oceans are vulnerable to them. The first trap is the value-cost trade-off trap. This happens when leaders slip back into the conventional belief that you must choose between offering greater value to customers or lowering your costs, but you can't do both. In blue ocean thinking, the goal is to break that trade-off entirely, to deliver more value while simultaneously reducing costs by eliminating or reducing elements that don't matter. But when market pressure builds, it's easy to forget that principle and start piling on costly features in the name of differentiation or cutting quality to compete on price. Both moves pull you back into the red ocean. The second trap is the niche market trap. Many leaders mistake a narrowly defined niche for a blue ocean. They create something unique, but only for a tiny group of customers, which limits growth and exposes them to being outflanked when a broader player adapts their idea for the mass market. A true blue ocean serves a wide base of non-customers, people who previously had no interest in or access to the industry's offerings, not just a specialized corner of the existing customer pool. Another common misstep is the technological innovation trap. Leaders sometimes believe that simply having cutting-edge technology creates a blue ocean. But technology alone doesn't guarantee value innovation. Many tech-driven products fail because they prioritize novelty over usability, or because they solve problems customers don't actually have.
The Segway, for example, was a remarkable technological achievement, but it never reached mainstream adoption because it didn't create enough new value for enough people. Blue oceans aren't about technology for its own sake. They're about using technology to unlock new demand in ways customers immediately recognize and value.
There's also the creative destruction trap, where companies assume that to create a blue ocean, they must completely destroy or abandon existing industries. While some revolutions do wipe out old models, many blue ocean moves actually build on and expand existing industries rather than replacing them. Starbucks didn't destroy coffee shops, it elevated them into a new experience that customers were willing to pay more for. The airline Emirates didn't try to kill off air travel as it was. It redefined long-haul flying by turning it into a luxurious, memorable part of the journey rather than just a means to an end. The authors point out the differentiation trap as well, where leaders focus so much on standing out from competitors that they ignore whether the differences actually matter to customers. You can be different in ways that are irrelevant, costly, or even alienating. True blue ocean differentiation is rooted in what customers value but are not getting, not in what leaders think looks impressive on a press release. Perhaps the most subtle trap is the growth trap. After achieving success in a blue ocean, many leaders become obsessed with scaling as quickly as possible. While growth is important, chasing it recklessly can dilute the very uniqueness that made the strategy work in the first place. Offering deep discounts to gain market share, expanding into unrelated product lines, or overextending operational capacity can all erode the value proposition. Avoiding these traps requires vigilance and a clear set of guiding principles. That means regularly revisiting your strategic canvas, re-engaging with customers to understand what they value now, and being honest about whether your activities are still breaking the rules of the red ocean or slowly conforming to them. It also means fostering a culture that questions assumptions, one where someone can ask, "Are we falling into a trap?" without fear of derailing momentum. In many ways, staying in a blue ocean is harder than finding one. The excitement of creation gives way to the discipline of preservation, and discipline is often tested in the face of competition, investor pressure, or shifting market winds. But leaders who understand the traps, name them, and guard against them have a far better chance of keeping their waters clear and wide long after others have drifted into the crowd. Ultimately, the red ocean traps are less about competitors and more about mindset. If you keep thinking like a blue ocean creator, focused on value, non-customers, and innovation that breaks trade-offs, you'll be far less likely to get pulled back into the fight you once escaped. And if you do find yourself slipping, awareness of these traps gives you the tools to correct your course before the water turns red again.
Creating a blue ocean is a strategic breakthrough, but embedding blue ocean thinking into the DNA of an organization is what turns that breakthrough into a long-term advantage. Without this deeper integration, the strategy can fade as leadership changes, market conditions shift, or teams fall back into old habits. The authors argue that for blue ocean strategy to truly last, it must move from being a project to becoming part of how the company thinks, decides, and acts every day. This begins with leadership alignment. Leaders at every level need to understand not just the outcome of the strategy, but the thinking that produced it. If the CEO champions blue ocean ideas, but middle managers still operate on red ocean rules, the execution will fracture. One way to avoid this is by using the strategic canvas not just as a planning tool, but as a common language across departments. When everyone is looking at the same visual representation of value and competition, it becomes easier to align decisions and keep focus on what matters. The second pillar is institutionalizing customer insight. Blue ocean strategy thrives on seeing customers and non-customers differently, finding unmet needs, overlooked frustrations, and hidden desires. This can't be a one-time research project. It needs to be baked into ongoing processes, with teams regularly engaging customers, testing assumptions, and scanning for patterns that could indicate the next leap in value. For example, Apple's continued dominance in consumer electronics is fueled by its ongoing ability to sense not just what customers want now, but what they will want before they know it themselves.
Empowering experimentation is another essential step. In red ocean environments, experiments are often seen as risky distractions from the core business. In blue ocean cultures, experiments are lifelines to the next opportunity. This means creating safe spaces for teams to test small-scale innovations without the fear that failure will be punished. The key is to design these experiments to learn quickly, cheaply, and clearly whether an idea has the potential to open a new space. Amazon's famous 2 pizza teams work this way. Small, autonomous units that can innovate rapidly while the larger organization supports and learns from them.
Next is rewarding value creation over activity. In many companies, people are rewarded for hitting output metrics, number of meetings, campaigns launched, products shipped, regardless of whether those outputs create meaningful value for customers. Blue ocean organizations shift incentives toward results that matter, like increased customer adoption, higher engagement from non-customers, or demonstrable leaps in value. This focus keeps teams anchored on the strategy's core purpose, rather than just its visible busyness. One of the most powerful cultural shifts comes from teaching everyone to think in terms of non-customers. This is not intuitive for most teams. We're trained to serve current customers better, not to look for the people outside the market entirely. But if every department, from product to marketing to operations, regularly asks, who isn't buying from us, and why? It opens a constant flow of new ideas. This question alone can keep an organization from getting trapped in incremental competition. Sustaining blue ocean thinking also means building cross-functional collaboration into the fabric of the business. Many breakthroughs come from seeing connections between silos, combining technology from one area with customer insight from another, for example. When departments share information freely and work together to design solutions, it's easier to see opportunities that no single group could spot alone. Finally, the authors stress the importance of storytelling. Facts and data persuade the mind, but stories move both hearts and minds. Leaders should consistently share stories about how the blue ocean strategy is making a difference in customer lives, in company growth, in inspiring employees. These stories keep the strategy alive in the collective memory, making it more than just a set of slides in a forgotten presentation. A blue ocean organization is never static. It is always scanning the horizon, always ready to question its own success, always willing to reinvent. It views competition as something to be made irrelevant, not as an enemy to fight endlessly. And it measures success not just in market share, but in the size and depth of the oceans it creates. When blue ocean thinking becomes second nature, the company no longer fears change, it thrives on it. It no longer waits for the market to tell it what's next, it shapes the market itself. And most importantly, it never runs out of room to grow, because it knows that in business, as in the ocean, the most exciting places to explore are the ones no one else has found yet.
The greatest lesson of building a business without rivals is that success is not simply about outmaneuvering competitors or playing the same game better. It's about changing the game entirely. It's about looking at the world not as a battlefield to survive in, but as an unexplored map filled with oceans no one has dared to cross. The companies that find these blue oceans are not necessarily the ones with the biggest budgets or the longest history. They are the ones willing to question the rules, to see customers not as numbers in a crowded market, but as people whose needs have not yet been met. When you create something truly unique, a service, a product, or an experience that resonates deeply, you are no longer fighting for attention. You are drawing people toward you naturally, because you've given them something they didn't know they were missing. That is the quiet power of innovation. It removes the struggle. It turns business into a space where curiosity and creativity lead, rather than fear and reaction. And the most remarkable thing is that these opportunities are always there. The ocean doesn't disappear simply because others are sailing in the red waters. It waits for the ones who dared to look beyond the horizon. This is the mindset that transforms not only companies but entire industries. It is the reason why some brands seem untouchable,
why they inspire loyalty that marketing alone can't buy, and why they grow in places no one else even thought to explore. So as you move forward, ask yourself, are you building to keep up with others, or are you building to set the course? Are you chasing the same customers as everyone else, or are you uncovering new ones who have been waiting for something different? The open sea is out there, full of potential, full of promise, and untouched by the constant battles of the harbor. The choice, in the end, is yours. Will you stay in the fight everyone else is losing, or will you set sail into the blue and claim waters that belong only to you?